Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Wolves Fancast YouTube channel for a new episode of GTA Fancast. Been away for a couple of weeks, owing to my own footballing commitments. Some positive, some not so positive. Actually, pulled a bit of a stinker out in front of Jody Craddock last weekend while Wolves were pulling off an amazing victory over Spurs. But the less said about that, the better. Um, I just thought it'd be a nice point in which to have a look at Wolves as a team so far under Gary O'Neill. We're 12 games in to the Premier League season. It feels like a healthy amount of minutes to kind of draw a few conclusions, not necessarily too many, but you're starting to see what a Gary O'Neill team looks like at the very least. And especially in the last few weeks, what a successful Gary O'Neill team looks like for sure. We've managed to settle down on a style of play, a bit of a shape, and actually the other thing to note as well is a very settled lineup. There's been quite a lot of consistency within the starting 11, which has caused some disparity in terms of how much you can read into the data around individuals and things like that. But I thought, what a still a nice point at which to kind of draw a few conclusions anyway. And the first thing I wanted to pick up on, which I've obviously noted in a few videos already this season, is the shape of the team. Always a hot topic when it comes to Wolves, still kind of looming large in the shadow of that kind of 3-4-3 that Nuno set us in. But we are playing quite a hybrid shape at the moment under Gary O'Neill. And I think the irony of it all is that we started the season as a team that set up in a back four. We conceded quite a few goals, but we actually still defensively sit in a back four. I think everybody would suggest that we maybe need to introduce the extra defender, obviously in the shape of Totti Gomez, who has come in and been a revelation really ever since he was introduced into the team. But I think the only game I would actually describe us as having played in a proper back three with a five at the back was against Manchester City. Otherwise, we've set up in this shape where it's a 4-4-2 out of possession. You can see here, this was a clip from the Newcastle game, and Ryan Nuri isn't quite in. Sorry, Totti Gomez isn't quite in shot here, but it's ironic that everybody would have assumed bringing in the extra defender would have made us more solid out of possession, but we actually are still taking that 4-4-2 setup, which means we're narrow, we're compact. The distances between midfield and forward line is all really good, and I think that's just a little bit of coaching and time on the pitch, training pitch, which has helped that smooth out some of those kinks, which led to us losing games like Brighton 4-1, like Crystal Palace 3-2 in the end, and the goals conceded column has looked a bit healthier from that point onwards. And just to cover, obviously that in possession game, then we are looking more like a team that sets up in the back three. Gary O'Neill obviously, well heralded his talk on Monday Night Football, and he mentioned, I think, on there, and I think maybe other forums as well, he likes to load up the front line with five players. So we are taking a little bit of a 3-2-5 shape. Ryan Aitnery not quite as high as he often is in games in this specific screenshot, which was against Aston Villa. But you can see that our forwards are able to play narrower because our wing backs are pushing on and really having an impact in the final third. I think that was really evident again against Spurs, having watched that game back. But it's funny how things work in football. Maybe we shouldn't pay too much credence to the description of a shape to begin with. It's more about what goes on in possession and what goes on out of possession. I think Gary's really imprinted his mark so far. What's the kind of upshot of that from a data perspective then? I've done a little bit of a comparison here between 22-23 season overall and then 23-24 up till this point. And I think the one thing that everybody was looking for was just more goal output from the team. And you can see quite a healthy improvement in that respect. There's only been one game in which we haven't scored, and that was the opening day of the season against Manchester United, a game in which we probably should have scored two or three, which again is perhaps a sign of the finishing quality within the team. I don't think Hwang started that game from my recollection, so the introduction of him has obviously helped that with his form. Pedro Neto building into the season. He wasn't quite firing on all cylinders to begin with, but from that Liverpool game onwards, obviously his output has been really good. Goals conceded, kind of, I think, is slightly skewed. Obviously, a smaller sample size we're working with here compared to a 38-game league season, but those games against Brighton and Crystal Palace that I've mentioned probably skew that slightly. And we've actually, I mean, you look at the XG numbers there as well. Healthy game from a goal scoring perspective and from a goals conceded perspective, we're actually tracking quite nicely in terms of we're getting what we deserve ultimately out of situations. But those the last 5 games specifically, we've actually won on XG. Now, it's not necessarily something you want to point out too much in terms of specific game data, but the fact of the matter is that that period of 5 games after is probably where we've had our best run of form, our most consistent lineup, our most consistent setups as a team, and it's reaping the benefits of the work that Gary O'Neill's doing, and I think we'll continue to see an improvement in that regard when we maybe take a check later in the season. I think the other point to make about this is the XGD. Now, that kind of tells me specifically that we're more competitive in games. We're more when we've narrowed the gap between our attack and our defence. A lot of it last season was to do with keeping clean sheets, and from an attacking perspective, we were really poor, even in the second half of the season. That minus 0.6 per 90 figure for XGD is, showing a fair, probably a bit of luck involved in terms of the way that we took our chances when we had them, and some stout defence meant that we didn't need to necessarily score too many goals or create too many chances to win, especially at home. Few other metrics to point out: post-shot XG, that's specific to Jose Sarr really, but a clear over performance there and real improvement in his game. MPXG per shot, so this is non-penalty XG per shot taken. That is a it doesn't look like it. It's a much healthier figure compared to last season. It's actually, I think, middle of the table from an entire league perspective, but it was actually bottom last season with 0.09. So it goes to show where we're being a lot more kind of not clinical, but a lot more careful about where we're actually creating our chances, and that is reflected in average distance per shot as well. Probably, you can account for that by the departure of Ruben Neves on his own, but really good to see that kind of information coming out there. Passing to the penalty area, there or thereabouts, but I think again we're probably being a little bit more circumspect about the way we're doing that. And also passes offside. I noted this one just because I think it was interesting to see that the team are trying to play in behind a lot more, I think, and that's noticeable for sure. Moving on to some more data here in terms of our league ranks for certain things. Shot creating actions via take-ons. Now, we actually showed it really well for take-ons last season as well. You can see here in this table, we were second in the league for successful take-ons throughout the season. Players like Adama Traore, like Mateus Nunes, obviously being exceptional ball carriers, but we weren't translating that into shot creating actions. So whether there's a pass that leads onto that leads to a shot, or a shot specifically that comes after a take on, we're second in the league for that now. So that's the real improvement I think we've made in terms of the areas of the pitch that we're beating people from and in, and the translation in the final third to a shot at goal, which is really promising. Tackles and interceptions, I think we're a team in the middle of the park that is set up to retrieve the ball as opposed to keep it. That's reflected again there. Lamina, Gomez, Boubacar Traore, all really combative players, and tackles in the defensive third. I think whilst we were pretty healthy position last season, again, that improvement. Someone like Ryan Aitnuri, someone like Nelson Semedo, really 1v1 kind of masters almost this season. So good to see. Ball recoveries, that's just picking up second balls, which is such an undervalued part of the game, I think, in the sense that we as fans probably don't appreciate how important it is just to pick up all those loose balls and really make sure you're first to everything. And we're top of the league, believe it or not, which might not necessarily be totally apparent, but again, kind of ties into the fact that we're not a team suited to keeping the ball too much, but getting it back, we're really good. Number of fouls committed, again, because we're so combative and aggressive, I think, and perhaps something to do with refereeing there as well. based on last season for sure. Gone to top of the league from second. And finally, aerial duels win percentage. This is such an important part of the game. Obviously led by the likes of Craig Dawson, the likes of Max Kilman. But when the ball is in the air, we are winning most of our duels, which is, I can't stress enough how important it is that that is the case. Final slide for you here. I just wanted to point out some individual kind of impact on the team. Obviously, Huang, since his introduction to the team, since his kind of real hot streak of form, we're a better team basically with him in it at the moment because of his output. Not necessarily his open play kind of contributions at the moment, but again, you can't do anything without a finisher within the team. And Totti Gomez as well, I think, is a really, really important player to pick up on because his introduction into the team's obviously allowed us to have that hybrid shape, but he's just a really, really good defender and he doesn't play badly at all. This is, you kind of suffer a little bit more by playing more minutes in this kind of metric. And you can see here the -4 covers players like Ran, Pedro Neto, Max Kilman, Mateus Cunha, Jose Sarr, and Craig Dawson. And we've had a lot of consistency in our lineup, which means a lot of players will, like Semedo, like Gomez, have been in the team when, we're losing 4-1 to Brighton, when we're losing 3-2 to Crystal Palace. So that probably accounts for some of that information, but maybe not one to read too much into, but I thought just an interesting thing to perhaps talk about. So I think overall you can just see an improvement based on last season. We're a better team to watch. We're a better team, I think, in general, in footballing terms. Perhaps missing a little bit in terms of our total kind of synergy in the final third. I think there are games in which we could have done more, where we could have scored earlier and taken control of the games, maybe taken the lead and actually really stamped our authority on it. And I think that'll come because we have had a really tough start to the season as well, arguably the toughest in the league so far. So I can only see better and better performances coming and better results as well. So looking forward to us returning from the international break against a Fulham team away from home, where I think we should be kind of trying to take the initiative against as well.